Welcome to MSP Unplugged. I'm your host, Paco Lebron. This is a place to learn how to run your MSP business, whether you're a nimble MSP or leading a team for the journey. This is the place for you. Let me go ahead and introduce my co-hosts, my partners in crime. First up, we got Rick Smith over at Renactus Technology. Rick, how the heck are you, my friend?
Doing good, doing good. It's a freezing Friday here in December in New Jersey, that is. But I'm doing good. Spirits are high, feeling good, and as I like to say, any better than it be a sin.
I will tell you that I can probably get you beat on all of y'all weathers because there was a weather posted by our very own Marvin B over at the IT Business Podcast, very much a partner of ours in the community. He's in Atlanta, Georgia right now. He said, "Holy cow, it is cold." He put 34 degrees. Mr. Smith, how cold is it over there by you?
I think it's 21 right now. So and I know and here's the funny thing: 2 days ago it was 60 degrees, and yesterday it was in the 30s, and today it's in the 20s.
Corey, how cold is it over by you?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it alone, man. We're sitting about 54, man. It was about down in the 30s this week, 54 today. So I won't go nowhere with that one.
It is a nice balmy 9 degrees today in Chicago. 9. It feels like 3. So, but anyway, I digress. But for those that heard our next co-host's voice, that is Corey Kirkendoll over at 5K Technical Services. Corey, how are you today?
Man, I'm doing well, brothers. Doing well, man. It's Friday. We tighten up the week, man, and always great to sit here and have a good time with the fam.
Nice, nice. By the time this comes out, it'll probably be around December. I believe it is going to be 17th. So we're going to be a little over past the middle of the month of December. And so that means you got about 2 weeks to figure out what you're going to do for the coming year of 2025. So in that fashion, we're going to go ahead and carry into our normal spiel. We're going to catch up, talk about a tip, trick, or story. And first up, we're going to go with Mr. Rick Smith. Rick, what you got for us this week?
This week I have a tip. No stories this time, but I've been talking around, messing around with AI a lot, and we all know that's going to be it's a big part of what's coming with us. So in searching for some AI tools, I come across this product called Sintra AI. That's SINTRA.ai. Now, what this is built off of ChatGPT, I'm pretty sure. And what it is you can buy it as one, or you can buy it as a group of 13. It's like their premise is basically having AI hire. So they have an AI that does there's all these different bots that do different things that would be in your business, such as one that does social media, one that does SEO, one that does would give you email ideas, or email what do you call it? Just for email. One that basically acts as an HR and does recruiting for you. It's a couple of more of them. One that is a copywriter, so to help you with anything you're writing for your website or for a document or a blog. I'm sorry, I can't get all these things out, but it's a pretty interesting tool. And what is good about it is that it learns as it goes along. Now, each bot acts independently, but what's great is you're working with something. Let's say I want to work on a blog. I talk to the SEO person about it. They will, and I give, hey, these are some ideas I'm looking on to work for a blog. We give them the ideas. It will generate, parts of a blog for me. I'll make some edits, and then it'll say, hey, now you should send it over to the copyright person. To the copy editor person to help you now, make this sound better. I'm using the wrong term, but it's a very interesting product. It was on, I believe it's still on. They had a Black Friday sale. This is how I caught it, knowing how our phones and everything listen to us. I was sitting here one day right at this desk working, talking to myself, using ChatGPT, saying, I wish I had something that could coordinate all of these bots. And about 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, I get an advertisement for this product. So again, Big Brother's listening, so be careful what you ask for and what you say.
No doubt.
But it was just amazing that happened. But I'm tooling around with it. I think it's pretty interesting. Again, like everything with AI, I tell you, watch what you put in, be careful. But if done properly, AI can be a great tool for us going forward. So Centra AI, if anyone's interested, give it a look and let me know what you think.
No, that's awesome. I think you mentioned that to me. I have not yet to register to try and take it out, but I know that you have been finding a little bit of success while we're trying to figure out so many AIs that are out in this world that can do so much. But Corey, what you got for us this week?
Yeah, man. This AI thing is definitely gonna change the world. I love it, man. Play with it, learn it, and do it. I tell everybody, man, you gotta have a minor in AI, major in whatever it is you do daily, but minor in AI. You gotta have that, man, because that's what's up from that perspective. For me, man, it's really when you talking about that, man. Is so today I do my follow up and things, man. Is really getting into process automation and everything today, right? So I'll be spending my time over the next couple of weeks really drilling down into robotic process automation with Roost, man, of automating things from that perspective. Some of the things we've been working on is really pushing stuff back out to the end customers to a point where if they want to onboard a new person or do something from that perspective, we have links on their internal SharePoint site that we support for them. That if hey, I'm hiring Kathy on the 1st of January and to do X, that it will say, great, it triggers the time, it creates the accounts, it does what it needs to get done, gets everything ready to go. Really getting to that point of leveraging process automation a lot. That's what we've been spending time on, man. It's pretty cool to see where you have those inefficiencies are and those efficiencies, and to really be able to move your technicians to be able to do some other things that you've been wanting them to do. And a lot of that comes that busy work is what they get hunkered down into. But I will tell you, it's stressful because it's kind of like we talk to our customers, or if you have any co-management, they like being in the weeds. They like resetting passwords because they feel it's valuable. That's their job. It's something that they can sit down and do. So having this automation stuff has definitely changed the culture in our environment a lot. So you got to be careful, make sure you keep them up to date of what you're doing, what the direction is, because you want them to
Right.
focus on more of the big ticket items than being in the weeds. So definitely have that conversation, but it's been fun.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that, for us, similar to you, we're revamping our entire onboarding series and experience in those journeys from, new onboarding client, new onboarding for client, employee, and device, and how those all flow. We're working with a company called Electronique, that's similar to some of the other RPMs that are out there, and trying to automate some of those things as well. So, but yeah, just like you, I think as much as we are invested in AI, we're also trying to invest in the automation, right? I think even Rick, we were talking to Rick earlier this week about how we're even automating some of the things we're doing here at MSP Unplugged, right? So, automation is key, especially if you don't want to, if you identify inefficiencies, and also if you want to try to save a couple minutes in your day here and there, automation is the way to go. But yeah, I mean, for us over here, I have a story. It's one of those where when you really think, how do I want to say this? So when you have an idea of how you want to do your journey and how you want to run your business, sometimes things change a little bit and you got to pivot. And sometimes it just changes your mind on how you look at certain things. Specifically, we have been following a lot of philosophies here. I've mentioned quite a few, such as like the Phoenix Project. And we'll talk a little bit about that during our topic for today. And then also the pumpkin plan, and for those that don't know what the pumpkin plan is, that's Mike McAllowitz. So the essential general idea, and there's more details to this, is how do you get rid of all the surrounding pumpkins that could be bad pumpkins, smaller pumpkins that are taking away the resources from the big prize pumpkins that you should have more of, right? And really not stifling what you should be doing of your health, your mental health, finances, work put, things like that. So, as we kind of identified this beginning of the year, I had a list of clients that I felt, okay, here are the bad actors, here are the pain in the butts, and then here are the ones that are just not understanding or not utilizing us to the full capacity because they're just so enamored with their disjointed systems. So we have this client, we've had them since 2019. So what is that? Almost 6 years now. And so, but we are a Microsoft house. And so we try to leverage as much of Microsoft as possible. Well, this location unfortunately had systems kind of put in place where they were on Google Workspace. They had another file repository instead of Google Drive or in in Microsoft OneDrive. They're using Microsoft apps. They have this other weird phone system. Everything just is very disjointed. And so some are on Windows, some are on Macs. They were using some personal devices at the time. So it took many years for us to get into this like comfortable state of, hey, here's what we can support you, but there's all these things that we really could be doing for you, but you're not taking advantage of. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. And so it's this constant back and forth that we used to have. Well, a new CEO took over about 2 years ago. And so the previous CEO who created the company has now stepped down. He's actually even off of his own board, enjoying retirement life. And so now there's been this big surgence of change and updates and things of that nature. Unfortunately, the office manager has really kind of been our champion, but also has put a firm foot down of like, she doesn't really want to have any changes happening. So she currently is on leave. And so there's a temporary office manager right now. The moral of the story, or I'll get to the moral of the story in a second. So my director of administration, business administration, was out doing our year-end celebration visits. So every end of the year, we do what you would probably consider a holiday, end of year holiday visit. Hey, drop by, shake hands, kiss babies, press elbows, and we drop off sweets or treats or something of that nature, just to say, hey, thanks for supporting us this past year. We're a little bit more inclusive on our side just because of religious beliefs for some of my employees. So we don't technically call it holiday celebrations. So we say year-end celebrations. And so while on these visits, she went to visit the temporary office manager and the frustration that the temporary office manager had. And so we got inside information that the CEO is very open on being able to correct disjointed systems. So now we have a call, we have a contact, we have information. Now we have this project that's been set up for us to finally move them into a position that we want them to be. So the moral of the story is when you are in a point where you're thinking, all right, well, they're not listening, they're not going to go through, we're probably just going to end up getting rid of them as we transition from one good client to another bad client. It may just take a visit or some trying to get into face-to-face to understand a little bit more to kind of get your way in. And so from that, by us scheduling and making these year-end visits, it allowed us to now get a better client or get our client in a better footing and now continue to have that growth with them in a way that's going to be beneficial to them and also easier for us to help make their lives a little bit easier. So that's my story, long-winded from there. So
yeah, it sounds to me like you had one person that was a bottleneck. And it's usually because, and again, I'm going based on, I'm extrapolating out based on the story you just told, but it sounds like you had one person who didn't want to change, so they made that decision for everyone basically, and became the bottleneck to making that progress that needed to be done.
Yeah, what I will say is that company, when we first took them on, was a very different culture. It was the first type of client that I took over where the CEO and the CFO didn't make the decisions. It was like an entire collective of checking with all the staff members, making sure that everyone was all on the same page. Did everyone agree? It was my first experience of that type of work culture. And so we had a lot of interest, but we had a lot of those members very against even switching from Google to Microsoft because there was so much work done to collaborate and connect these systems that quote unquote could not be replicated. Well, those employees are now gone from some of these changes and sweeps and things of that nature. So we just have one of the last samurais that, again, has been our champion. She's been great, but there's just that altering of they don't want to. And so they have not, it's been hard to kind of go over that hump until now we have that opportunity to do so.
And that resistance to change.
Yep.
Yeah, but way to stay with it. And it eventually paid off. Like you said, taking that extra step. And because normally what you would do is, the mindset may be, hey, I'm ready to get rid of these guys anyway. So we won't even make this year-end visit to them. We'll skip them because they're going to be gone.
And that's my point. Yep.
And and it's a good, a good thing that you guys stay with it. And now that has generated business and you're Sounds like in the process now of getting the client where they should be, or on the process
Right.
on the road to where they should be.
100%.
Yep.
Love
So
it.
perfect. So we'll dive into our topic of this week. It kind of carries off from last week's episode. Last week we talked about pricing. And one of those items that we had discussed and Corey brought up very important is, you when you're figuring out your pricing, you got to figure out what is your utilization rate, whether that's your ticket/tech utilization, your burden rate, and all of the above, and figuring out, all right, am I properly understanding what my burden rate is and what is my utilization, or am I just picking a number out of the air and just applying it to my pricing and then hoping for the best? So I'll let Corey kick off a little about kind of where he was coming from that on that side, and then we'll just dive into some of these rates and how you would calculate those and some of the tools that you could probably be using to figure out some of these things. Corey, I'll go ahead and let you sign it up.
Man, I appreciate that, man. We can have probably about 10 shows on this, man, and still everybody does it. So I'll start that off by saying that, this is the way that I see it. There's multiple ways to do it. There's no right, wrong way to do it. The main thing is that you're actually thinking about it and doing it in some way, right? And actually putting it together, that it's not a magic formula or no silver bullet to make it happen. So last week when we were talking about pricing and where it comes down and saying, hey, how do we set and do the right price? When we talked about something called utilization or burden rate. And if you don't know what those rates are, it's very difficult to set the right price, because you're still kind of guessing. You're either going to shoot too high or shoot too low. And then, want to be low, because that means you're working for free. You shoot too high, you're going to price yourself out, or be in a situation where you're figuring out like, man, why am I not closing these deals? Because, you're 1.5 times higher than everybody else out there, because that's where it comes from. So one thing we'll talk about is utilization rate. And I start this off by saying that as an MSP, I don't want to make the assumption, but I would say everybody would have a PSA that's out there. And in that thing, you think about it, it's that professional service automation tool, right? Really think about that, not ticketing system, not whatever. That thing can do a bunch. And so what you would do is, even if you don't have one, or you're looking for one, or you have one and you haven't fully do it, you got to make sure first and foremost that you are billing out of that PSA. Your contracts are in there, what you're billing in it, what your machine, whether it's a per user, per device, and make sure that as tickets come in, they're being charged against those accurate contracts, and that your techs are putting in their work and you're putting in your work against those. What that's going to allow you to do is to see how much time you're doing against that contract based on the rates of your techs and then based on what's happening in that situation, to really show you what the utilization is and what it is. And what you'll find out is that typically the person who's paying the least is probably getting the most attention, and the ones who are paying the most are not getting a lot of attention. And you're like, whoa, that's kind of weird. But only way you're gonna know that is being able to see that. But what it'll allow you to do now is to go look and make sure that, one, that I'm servicing up where I need to get done, some things that need to be getting fixed. But then am I cost and priced accordingly to the size of the customer, what the customer is doing, and how I'm doing it, to make sure that we're spreading that love around what that ultimately looks like. That's the first thing, is that's why real-time ticket entry and time entry is really, really, really important. But it doesn't work if you don't have that tied in and billing out of that situation. If you're just billing out of your QuickBooks or your Xero or whatever that is, and then guessing on the cases, you're in the same city, but you got to get down to the street level.
Right.
And that's the kind of piece you want to look at from a utilization piece.
Yep. If you don't figure out what's on the block's gonna get you. But anyway, Mr. Smith, have you we always talk about real-time ticket logging and time and things of that nature. Do you log your ticket time in real time, or do you go ahead and summarize, as Mr. Kirkendoll?
He's picking on me, y'all. He's picking on me. And I've been open and honest about this. I have had throughout the years that issue of doing that, like completing tasks and not logging them, right? So I it is now part of policy that everything that comes in has to be logged. Every ticket, everything minor to major has to be logged, because of exactly what Corey just said. You don't know what is costing you or what you're spending, or you don't know where you are if you're not recording what you're doing, right? You don't know where you're going if you don't know what you've done. And sitting here at the end of the year when you're trying to figure it out and you're trying to remember, hey, back in September, I put in this server or I put in this such and such. And you're guesstimating now how much time you put it in because you didn't record it ahead of time. It really bites you in your butt. So, you know, as Paco's alluding, I was a I can say, quote unquote, I was a habitual non-ticketer, right? A client calls me, I'm sitting here. If I pick up the phone or I answer a ticket, which I try not to do anymore anyway, but if I do it, I'll just do it and then don't log it, right? Two things happen with that, though. One, first and foremost, there's no record of what you've done, right? So you can't talk about utilization. You can't figure out utilization. You can't figure out exactly how much time you're giving that client. And two, if you don't handle this client the next time and one of your techs picks this call up and there's no notes or no reference to what's happened the last time, you know, what was done, that you've put that tech in a bad position too, because it could be an issue that you solved or you tried to solve before and there's no notes on it, and you basically are wasting their time as well. So you know, getting back to just this part of it though, just figuring out what it costs, that's you know, that's what I'm saying, that's why it's important. And Corey said something else that rang a bell to me that made me ring a bell. Every tool we use should have a purpose, right? The PSA, the purpose of that is not just ticketing, right? The ticketing is the outward part we do, but all the information that we feed the PSA is what we really need. Think about it. You don't go to your PSA to figure out how much money you made in the year. You go to QuickBooks, right? Or you Xero, whatever you use. That's what shows you your profit and loss balance, right? You're not going to get that anywhere else because the information that feeds from your PSA and other places feeds there, and that's where you get your answer from. We need to treat our PSA the same way, because if we want to be efficient, we need to know what we're putting in, you know what's in there, and then that really tells us the story on if we're charging effectively, if we're utilizing our time effectively, where we need to, you know, make adjustments. So I'll leave it there for right now, but that is definitely, you know, something I personally have had to focus on, and now it is a policy that every time the phone rings, we have to log in what it is.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think you know, for those that are listening, they're like, yeah, I'm with Rick. I don't got time. I was about to swear. I don't got time to log. I'm trying to fix these issues. I'm trying to, you know, get through and survive the next moment, right? But, you know, if you don't, reactive work or unplanned work will torpedo your day, right? So if there's not enough planning or foresight ahead of time, you know, you're not going to be able to succeed what you want to do. You're always going to get derailed by something else, right? And so by not logging the ticket comments, by not logging the information, you got somebody else as another team member, or maybe a client replied to a ticket saying, hey, what's the latest with this? And now you can't remember if you did it or not did it because you didn't update the comments. So there's a lot of that goes on, and now you're in the middle of something else. Now you got to stop, you got to go from there, right? And so it's so important to treat your PSA so much more than just a ticketing system, right? Because at that point you could just get, you know, a ticketing system at that point. But the purpose of you running your business is this PSA is supposed to be a systematized system to help you understand what's going on with your business, right? It's probably as important as what your accountants are looking at inside of whatever financial software you're looking at, whether that's QuickBooks, Xero, etc. And so one of these things that I found very helpful was, I've mentioned this book before. It's called The PSA Profitability. And that's what helped simplify some of these things for me. It's written by Chris Tim. He is a consultant over at Sonola Consulting out in the UK, I believe. He did a lot of work consulting with Autotask. I think he's doing a lot of work now with Halo PSA. They have a podcast. And so what was interesting about this book is it introduced not only the understanding of tech utilization, but also the understanding of burden rate. And these terms are interchangeable for burden rate, and they've been called so many things, but basically, what is your technicians, yourself, what is the burden to the business so that you are calculating these rates properly. And so one of the items that, again, as Rick said, you know, it was hard to try and figure this piece, or not figure it out, but it was hard to stay disciplined to add these items of your time, because again, you're trying to move forward. Well, how do you simplify that? And so one of the items where every PSA should have a way of logging time, whether that is a drop down, whether that's manual, there is a way to create a time log to then make it billable, right? And depending on how your plans are built, should adhere to this flow. Now, oftentimes, what would end up happening is when you're first starting out, thinking this is a ticketing system, you would put maybe like 10 to 15 statuses of what is it you're logging against that time. And you're treating it as like a ticketing status versus it being an actual line item that should be against you. So, for example, we had several line items. We had remote support labor, we had on-site labor, we had in-office labor, we had, and so what really helped us understand is like, look, if it's not remote or in person, there should be no other statuses outside of these two. So maybe you should start consolidating some of these statuses you're marking time against. So now you're improving the efficiency and at least the readability of your reports. And it was things like that that allowed me to say, oh, well, I'm just making it more complicated than what it needs to be. I just need to do less, consolidate these statuses. What am I trying to figure out? I think we're in this era where we're always trying to adhere to a KPI that another MSP or another thought body believes is important. But our business all operates differently. So we got to create our own KPIs of what's important to us to drive our growth, right? And so one of these is the burn rate and the tech utilization piece. And how do you calculate that? But before I go into the whole, hey, here's how you calculate all this stuff, is there anything you two wanted to add on to that, where really focusing on, identifying your systems, adopting a philosophy of how you want to adopt these systems and things of that nature? And then I'll beat that horse a little bit more, and then we'll start going into those formulas.
Yeah, I'll jump out there. So what I look at is, man, there's two pieces of this thing, man. My RMM and my PSA, man, are my right and left ventricles of my heart, right? And no matter what other tool should integrate into those, period. I don't care how cool, how shiny the ball is. If there's no integration into that, then you don't get in. It just doesn't happen. Because at the end of the day, my RMM is having a challenge and he's dumping cases in here and the PSA is tracking those cases that are automatically handled and closed. That's actually real work that is doable, that a physical body would have to do. So you need to understand that, because that's where you're showing the value back to your customer and client as well. And so if you're using your PSA only to track tickets that they call in and work on, and missing all the back end automation, proactive stuff that you're doing, then you're missing a great conversation to have to your customer saying, yeah, you see that we did 100 tickets, but we really did 5,000 tickets. And this is how much we were able to do if we were not there. Right. And that's why I think it. So I think everything needs to have a tight integration. It needs to be able to be seen between both. You're never going to get to a single pane of glass, but they at least should talk to each other very easy. And if it's not on the roadmap, it better be on the roadmap pretty clear before you integrate.
And I'm just going to add one other thing. When we talk about planning these things out, how we work, how our RMM and our PSA work together, or all the other tools we use, how they all integrate, and how we come up with a burden rate, and how we come up with a price, and all of these things we talk about. One of the things I've learned this year, I spent this whole year researching and retooling how we do things. And the one thing I learned is most important, rather than starting at the beginning and trying to build up, start with the end in mind, right? This is where I want to be. And then you can work backwards as opposed to doing it the other way. Because if you start from the bottom, you end up doing this, right? As opposed to coming here. So this is where I want to be. And that doesn't mean this doesn't get adjusted as you learn. But when you start here, so with all of as Corey is speaking and Paco speaking, all of the integration, having the numbers, having the plan has to be here. And then you work it down. And then you'll come to how you get to all of these steps we're talking to get, to get that plan enacted.
Yeah, I mean,
Preach, brother.
I think
Preach.
right. That's what I'm saying. Take us to church. But no, I think it's so interesting that you say that, right? Because I think for everyone, right, they're like, all right, we're gonna do this, we're gonna get more efficient. but they don't know what that looks like is the other part. Like some have a clear goal. Like I want this to happen. This is how I want to be able to figure out how my pricing is. I'm going to focus on this niche. I'm going to figure out. And we have others out there that are like, look, we're billing what we can and we're trying to do what we can because they want to figure this out, but they don't even know what the end in mind looks like. Right. So how do you simplify that? So for us, what we did is, we adopted a philosophy inside of the Phoenix Project, which is basically the zero, I forgot what it's called now. It's the theory of constraints. And essentially the theory of constraints basically says there are so many things that are going on in your business that you are allowing or you're okay with that may be stifling the growth. But until you have the data to understand what are the pain points, and there are probably many, you will never know what's going on. So for us, we did this, I think it was about 3 years ago, maybe, where we adopted what they felt was there's 4 categories of work in a business. There's always going to be in how they're organized, and that's how you can kind of figure out your utilization. So this is what we built out inside of Synchro when we were in Synchro, is in this model of utilization, there are 4 categories. It's going to end up being all internal projects, meaning anything that has to do inside of the business, whether you are reevaluating your stack, you are migrating over to a new vendor, you are developing a new asset tracking methodology inside of your system, naming conventions, internal documentation changes. These are all internal projects, and that sits on its own category inside of the PSA system. The next one, you have your business projects. These are obviously going to be those that, hey, I have a office on-site office extension, satellite office. We need to recable the facility. We're upgrading the network. We're upgrading the assets and the workstations in the place. These are all business projects, and that has its own utilization that you can detect on what's going on. Next one is changes. Any change requests that come in, this is going to, you want to detect your utilization, whether those are password resets that are coming in from the client. And when I say changes, business changes, meaning coming from your end client, from your end user. Changes of, hey, we got to remove this employee. We have to change these set of data that's inside of there. We're making a switch from XY. So these are going to be the changes that are coming in from your clients. And then the most important one that jacks everyone's day is the unplanned work. Everything that is broken, everything that doesn't come up, printer's not working, internet is down, I dropped my laptop, I got a virus, anything that has come up that was not expected will be in its own category. So why am I going through and explaining these 4 categories? So from these 4 categories, we then from there created the ticket statuses or the status types. Now we go into, all right, if it's unplanned work, what is the unplanned work being reported on? Hardware, software, printer, internet. There's a VoIP. There's a few others in there that you would associate with unplanned work. Changes, password resets, new user swap out, whatever the case may be for there. Internal projects, here are internal projects. And so now, instead of just saying I'm logging a ticket for a printer repair or a printer issue, now it's like it's an unplanned printer issue. Why did that happen? So here's why this is important. 2 reasons. One, you can now have a solution that's different from the utilization that's being done on a client. So for example, we had a client, I've used this example in the past. We had a client that would always create SharePoint tickets all the time. This is not working. I'm not seeing this person. I'm not whatever. And so when we made all these shifts, we came to find out these are not unplanned tickets, which we thought, it's a ticket, it's broken, we have to fix it. These were all change requests. Well, why is this lady every Monday sending in 7 change request tickets? Well, it was a lack of education. So we went from this client is creating a burden on us and our utilization is through the roof, where we now identify this is an education problem, a user education problem. Let's show them, let's take out an hour or 2 to figure out, hey, here's how this system works. And then let's see if that lowers our ticket utilization and our ticket volume. And sure sugar honey iced tea. It sure did lower the volume, provided a higher utilization of our technicians to this client, and the burden rate wasn't as bad for the burden that we have calculated for wasn't as bad because we now understood what the issue was. We weren't putting a band-aid on it. We went to go solve the issue. And so that's why I say, if you're trying to figure out where to start, this is one of the philosophies of many that are out there, but that's how we did this to try and get to some footing from there. I don't know if you two have anything similar to that on how you started to venture down this, hey, all right,
Yeah.
making sure this utilization report makes sense inside of our PSA.
Now you're hitting it around the head, man. We do something very similar to, as a ticket comes in, man, if it's anything that says new, here's where we put it. Anything that says, here's where to put it in those right buckets so that you can sit down and do that to drive those conversations back, to be able to identify that you're having a training issue. But they also reminded that you needed all of your customers to be putting tickets in, your employees to be addressing it, so that you can go back and address those trends with your customers to know where to drive them and go and get that stuff fixed the right way. So it's a team effort, right? The main thing is you got to drive that culture of documenting. I remember when I was the first to ConnectWise, they used to have a thing that if it ain't in the PSA or not in ConnectWise, it didn't exist, right? Yep. And we live by that. If it ain't in my PSA, I don't want to hear about it. I don't give a crap that it's in your email. I don't give a crap that they text you on your phone. I don't give a crap whatever. Your job is to get it into the ticket. Because at the end of the day, that's where it matters. That's where the rubber hits the road.
Yep. Mr. Smith, got anything to add on to that?
No, I think you guys hit it on the head. I think it's just it's making sure you document everything. And I think something you said is very important too. Even the stuff you do in office, like for yourself, for the business, you treat the business as a client as well, because that is utilization in your time as well, right? Or your text time, or whoever does the work, that is still utilization. I think a lot of times we take that for granted, right? So when we're, and this goes back again to me trying to figure out what a client cost us and what everything cost us. If I'm not logging in or keeping track of the time we spend doing our own internal projects, at the end of the year, I know how many hours I'm paying for everyone, right? I know how many hours we're supposed to have in that year. Now, if I'm missing a big chunk of hours, I'm trying to figure out where is this time? Where did it go?
Right.
If we're not documenting the things we're doing internally as well, that skews the numbers. And this all goes back to, again, I think we'll get into now how we're calculating and using burden rate. And I know last week we talked about one of my big surprises when doing this and looking at the time we spend on tickets, that tells me now what a client actually cost me, right? And then this is how I figured out that, again, it goes back to, it leads back to figuring out where the real problem is, because I've found out that a lot of the smaller clients cost me more than the larger clients. And this is not necessarily about the revenue that comes in. I'm talking about the cost on the other side, because every ticket, every project, everything you do, there is a cost associated with it. And that is in man hours and, maybe in physical product or whatever. But you have to know what that cost is in order to know, if you're, and first and foremost, and the biggest thing is going to tell you is if you're pricing correctly, what your clients are getting. And I think that's a big deal. But it all goes back down again to documenting what you're using, what you're doing, and calculating the time. And like Paco said, this was another thing I think a lot of us take for granted in our PSAs is that time piece, right? Is that actually using that clock or that ticker that I'm sure all PSAs have, whether it's automatic or you have to do it manually. That is very important. And again, when I implemented that, the problem with us was we would turn it on, but not turn it off, right? So you got to remember to do that as well. And again, now this just leads back to policies and procedures. And for us, everything was a policy. So in that step, you start a ticket with your clock, you end a ticket with your clock, right? You hit that clock before you hit the closed ticket. So, and that's just very important. Yeah, I'm sorry.
For sure.
No, you're good. You have something to say, Corey?
No, for sure.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, I agree.
Yeah. So, because they are a sponsor and me and Rick do use them, but I will tell you a slick thing that I just realized doing inside of Super Apps for time entries. So if you follow this flow and you have the Monica AI enabled, it'll actually log the time and your comments for you. So if you initiate the chat inside of the ticket, which they have the chat feature that's coming out here soon, if not already live. And I can say that because there's early access already
Chat
being
feature is
advertised
live.
for. It is live. Okay, cool. So I just, sometimes I know certain things and I just can't remember what I can and can't say. But when you go into the chat, you chat with the user, you communicate with them, you use the Splashtop integration to remote in, you do your thing, boom, boom, boom. You have the conversation with them, you solve the issue, whatever. When you say, hey, thanks, whatever, you finish the remote session. When you're about to end the conversation and you close out the chat, it says, do you want to add to the work log? And so when you click on the add the work log, what it will do is not only will they have the time, which normally you should be able to, it's all PSAs normally will generate how much time you were on the remote system, but it will summarize the conversation and what you did on the remote session into the work log. So all you have, sometimes you would end up just adding it as a comment and then you'd have to copy it again to the work log because that's how Super Apps is set up. Some of them are set up where if you add a comment that you can add it as time. But when you hit add to work log, it summarized it for me. I didn't have to think about summarizing this what I did. Didn't have to figure out how long it was. I literally add work log, marked closed, and it did it all for me. So I was like, this is going to incentivize me to start doing the chat more often and to use the Splashtop integration because we go between ConnectWise Control and Splashtop right now. But now this is incentivizing me to save time by adding my time. So anyway, just wanted to pimp that feature out because I thought that was pretty cool inside of the system. But
Like that.
Going back into task, let's jump in and really talk about, everyone's heard us talk about why we should care about these things, why we talked about tech utilization, why we should care about burden rate. But they're probably asking, well, how the hell do I change? How do I even figure this out for us? Right. And so there's a couple formulas that are out there. This is the one that I found that we calculate internally. And then you all can dive in, see if there's something similar or if you do something a little bit different. But basically, first, we're going to talk about the technician utilization rate, which basically is going to measure the percentage of the technician on what they spend on billable activities compared to the hours that they're available to work. So, for example, let's say they have 30 billable hours, but they're available for 40 hours in the week, right? And usually, so the question becomes, well, why aren't they doing the full 40? Well, they got to get up, they got to take lunch, they're not robots, they're not the AIs that we can poke them and keep them onto the screen there, right? And then you should be also paying, allowing them to educate themselves as well, right? And some of that part in there, at least that's what we do. But this is also important for yourself, right? So we do, let's say if the billable hours are 30 hours, total available hours are 40. So basically what you end up doing is you take that, you divide the 30 between the 40, you got about 0.75, and then you times that by 100. So by 100, you go get about 75%. So what that means is your technician utilization rate should be around 75% of the billable hours that they are supposed to be helping billing for versus what they were available to work. Is that something you guys are around? I don't know if those numbers of the example make sense, but is that the formula you're using to understand your utilization rate for yourselves or for your technicians?
Yeah, I mean, right on point. I mean, you hitting it right on the head of saying, hey, about 75-80% is where you want to be. You're never going to get 100%, and that's where you want to be. And it's very important because you kept saying something that what I think is key is on the billable hours, right?
Right.
You also got to make sure you account for internal work and other things that may be doing. Like you ask them to go do something that's strictly against ProdigyTeks, right? It has nothing to do documenting or doing something else. But on the billable hours, this is where you want to make sure that they're billing. Because what's important about this is if we focus on those billable hours and you talk about the cost or what it is, what you start to see is, and as an owner, it's going to frustrate you because you're going to see that you got a bucket with a lot of holes in it and you just letting stuff flow out of the door, right? And your goal is not to put duct tape and stop the flow. Your job is to get the bucket fixed and stop the water from flowing. And then you can do some really cool stuff that brings it back, right? You can say, all right, if we able to bill and get your accountability right, then that's where the bonuses and the raises and everything come, because you're creating those dollars to take care of itself. Right. It's a win-win. We able to serve the customer work, but now we're able to go down that path. But that billable piece is critical, is focusing on those pieces, because there's also some administrative hours that can get mixed in there and intertwined, but you want to make sure you really have your guys focused in that billable category as much as possible.
Yep. And I want to shift a little bit to the cost, right? So let's talk about, we know we figured out the utilization, right? How much of it we're doing against the billable hours, but what does it cost us? What does those billable hours cost us, right? So this is where you have to take in, this is where data is important as well.
So really quick, before you go into burden rate, I just want to make sure that when we tie that up is, so for all of you, for the utilization, your steps to figure that out is take the next 3 weeks or 2 weeks, track your billable hours, record your hours that you or your technicians spend on tasks that can be billed to a client, track all the total available hours that are available for the technicians that you work or that the technicians work, including both billable and non-billable, and then calculate the utilization rate. And then use that formula that I just mentioned, and that'll give you what's currently happening versus what you would like it to be happening. And then that'll allow you to understand that piece. But go ahead, Mr. Smith, over at burden rate.
Yeah. Well, then on the burden rate side is really just knowing your numbers, right? So it's more than just, I pay a technician $25 an hour. So it costs me $25 an hour every time that technician, touches a computer, because it's, you have to know, again, I'm sure all of us, if you pay anyone on payroll, there's the tax part of this, right? So you have to calculate the taxes that you pay. And so an $80,000 employee in New Jersey, just with taxes, no benefits, nothing else, just with taxes, is like something that in the realm of $87,000, $88,000 a year, right? So that's another $8,000 that you're responsible for in taxes. And if you add on benefits, you add on any kind of insurance, anything else you do, there's a cost to that. And then there's all the overhead that your business takes in, and that's your rent, your utilities, your expenses for everything else. We take out, and for us, we take out what we spend on our COGS, like off our cost of goods sold is not included in that number. But all of your business overhead expenses, those all factor in, and they all play a role, because all of these things factor into you using that employee, right? So, and if you're, and I'm just going to say this way, you can qualify it this way. If you're a single person and you're the only one in the business, it works exactly the same way. Somewhere you're paying yourself, but or if you're not, let's get you to the point where you are paying yourself, but there is a cost involved in that, right? So you can calculate that burden rate exactly the same. If nothing else, what would you like? What is an ideal salary that you should be making as a CEO or as the CEO / tech or whatever? And you factor that in, and that gives you a number. So now that you know that number, whatever it is, that tells you, and you break that down on an hourly basis, and then you have the utilization that you're using for your client, for each client. You now know exactly what it costs you to run, for that technician to run that client. And then that is a number you use now, and how it helps you to set pricing as well going forward. I hope that was clear. You guys can speak better than I do, so you can probably clear that up and make it sound a little more Englishy.
No, I think you hit it right on the head. It really comes down to is understanding that you need to understand what it takes to cost and provide the services to your customers. And at the end of the day, that's what you need to be charging and cover it to break even from that side. And if you're a true MSP, you're really looking at from that monthly recurring revenue. And to make it as simple as possible is that at the end of the day, when you look at everything, your MRR should cover everything that you're doing to run the business, and everything you do from projects or above is gravy, icing on the cake, right? That's kind of the goal that you want to be into. It says at the beginning of the month, if I'm doing MRR right and I'm priced right, all my salaries are paid, my rent is paid, my bills are paid, everything is good, and I I'm at zero or cash in the bank, and any project or anything that I do on the outside of that is extra. That's profit, pure going to the bottom line. That's kind of the goal.
Yep. No, I mean, I think, really, again, to harp this home is that, the burden rate includes obviously all the indirect costs that are associated with employing that technician. So, Rick, like you just mentioned, whether you're offering benefits, the taxes that are included into that employee, or just the overhead costs, whether that is the equipment that's associated with that employee, all the business costs in there, dividing it across all those that are working for the business. And that's how you would go ahead and get that overhead cost to include in that number. But in order to understand your burden rate, all you basically would have to do is really focus on what are the total indirect costs total to the direct labor hours that you're hiring for. So for example, let's say, and again, these are just pure numbers. If anyone's paying this, I want to know who you're hiring for that. But let's say the indirect cost is $10,000, and that's including benefits, taxes, and overhead. And then there's a total direct labor of hours of 500 hours, right? You want to basically divide the two of those. And from that, you're going to get $20 an hour, right? And so from that piece, you'll be able to understand that that burden rate should allow you to add, if you're charging per user, if you're charging per device, or if you're doing a hybrid, now you understand what is the burden rate of that employee, or as you calculate for all the employees, and understanding that that is what my per hour situation is. This is what is the burden rate from there. And now I can understand that if I'm charging hourly, if I'm, however I'm billing, you can now incorporate that as you decide, all right, here's where I got to figure out what my pricing is, and this is how it's determined. Rick, Corey, does that sound about right on how you're calculating your burden rate?
100%.
Sounds exactly right. And I want to add one thing, and then we're going to go back a little bit, and I know we're going to be pressed on time, so I'm going to try to say this quick. We go back on pricing, right? So when we know what our cost is, right? We know what our employee cost is. We know what all our tool stacks cost us per employee, per user, per whatever, right? This is the way we calculate our price. Knowing that, this is what we do. We take that number, that raw number, that cost per whatever you charge, per device, per person, per user, per company. We take that raw number, put a 70% margin on it. That is our price. That's how we determine our price. Sometimes we do use our little PIA calculation that may add like 1.2 on that or something, but that is how we determine our price. And if you take that price, if you do this right, we use what's called a 30-30-30-10. 30% of that now of that price will go back to pay, as Corey was talking about. 30% of that price is now covers all of that, the cost of the stack cost, basically. The stack cost includes the employee burden rate. The other 30% is for payroll, and the other 30% is for your expenses, and the 10% left, it should be profit.
Right.
If your numbers get better than that, the stack cost should always be 30, right? That 30% of that should always be the stack cost. But if you can get your numbers better than that on the other two, then if you can get your expenses and your labor costs, lower, then you have more in profits there. But we try to do that. So we do a 30-30-10, 30-30-30-10, and that tells us we're helping.
Gotcha. Awesome. So next steps for all of those you're trying to figure out: sum up all your indirect costs. Again, benefits, taxes, stack, overhead, whatever is associated to that employee or to yourself. That's going to calculate your total direct costs. Obviously, record the next part is your total direct labor hours. Record all the total hours that are worked by your technician. From there, you use the formula, and then that's how you get your burden rate. And then you'll be able to get a little bit more transparency on what you're doing from there. So I think a few last practical tips for everyone to follow is obviously use your software tools, utilize your PSA. If you don't even know how your PSA can do that, reach out to customer support, reach out to your rep. I'm sure they have some resources or libraries on how to benefit and utilize some of these things as well. Make sure you do regular reviews of your stuff. Make sure either if it's quarterly, if it's annually. I mean, it should be more often, but we all are busy, and especially if you're doing this on your own, you got to make the time to figure out. And as often as you can do it, that's how you should be able to do it. And then really just understand, like, benchmark. They say you should benchmark yourself to the industry, but I would challenge you to benchmark yourself to yourself and understand, what did you do this year to the last year? How did you, and if you're just starting out right now, work through this entire year and work, hey, this quarter, let's benchmark to last quarter. Hey, we did a little bit better. Let's how we go improve from there. You know, as they say, to build a wall, you got to lay it brick by brick, and then you get a wall. You can't just lay walls and get the building going, right? So you got to do it step by step. You got to do it to your own pace. And hopefully these are some practical tips that you all, and some value you all heard from here. But before we sign off, any lasting words, Mr. Smith or Mr. Kirkendoll?
Man, just hey, if it was easy, everybody be doing it, man. So it's hard work. I'll let you know it's hard work. But also, man, you also have us here, man. Reach out to us if you need help. Pop a question in there, and whatever we can do to share. We may know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody, or we know have an answer for you. But don't do this alone. But you got to go do it.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo what Corey said. Is basically, if you have questions about it, put it somewhere. Again, comment here or hit the Facebook group up, because again, if the three of us don't have an answer for you or can't point you in the direction, I'm sure there's somebody who's going to be reading it. Probably our champion, Jason Miller, of course, but there's going to be somebody out there who's out there reading it, who will have an answer or be able to point you in the right direction. So again, we all are going to learn from each other and through communication. So, again, Paco always said this: no question is a dumb question unless Rick asks it, but no question is a dumb question. So, again, that's just my encouragement for the week.
Perfect. Gents, it's another one in the bag. We appreciate all of you listening in here today. But if you like what you heard, tune in every week. We're on watch over on the video podcast. That's over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. You can like, subscribe, and hit that notification button to be notified whenever a new episode is available. And we try to do these weekly now, so stay tuned. You can also go ahead and take us on the go. We're on your favorite podcatcher app. We're on a few services like Amazon Music, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts, to name a few, I should say. And most importantly, stay tuned, because we'll be having some announcements about TechCon Unplugged here soon. And as I mentioned before, if you listen to us on some other podcasts, there may be some hints on what's going on with that in 2025. But again, we want to thank you for listening. And most importantly, we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.